Hello and welcome to the first sports journalism radio show. I'm your host, Mitchell Horucy. I'll be starting us off with maybe the hottest topic in this upcoming draft, Travis Hunter, and what will happen with him. So Hunter, everyone knows, won the Heisman Trophy last season, not only for just his defensive play, but his offensive play too. Now, he has been on record saying that he wants to play both sides of the ball at the next level. And this is something that we really haven't seen before in the professional level, and it'll be really interesting to see what teams do. Realistically, there's really two teams that could take him. It's between the Browns or the Giants, as Cam Ward is basically locked into the first overall pick with the Titans. So yeah, Hunter is very, very interesting. There have been players that have played both sides of the ball in certain extents, like Deion Sanders, maybe the most famous one. Charles Woodson in college, he won a Heisman for doing a little bit of both sides of the field, but no one has done it to the level Hunter has done it. Now, he has gone on record saying that if the team that drafts him doesn't let him play both sides, he is going to retire just right then and there. Now, obviously, the team that drafts him is going to have to be very careful when they decide what they're going to do with him. He is obviously an unbelievable talent, really on both sides of the ball. And what a lot of people have been talking about, a lot of people on ESPN and other various sports media outlets have been saying, what some teams, especially the Browns and the Giants, want to do is major in one position, minor in another, meaning he'll play dominantly wide receiver. That's what he'll major in. He'll be a focal point on offense for, let's say, the Browns offense. But then on defense, he'll be a corner. He'll be out there on big plays, maybe third down in the fourth quarter, but he's not going to play, 200 snaps a game. Hunter, however, he thinks he can do that. And even everyone has talked about the physical toll it'll take on your body, or even the mental toll, the amount of meetings he's going to have to be in. He thinks he's going to be able to do it. He thinks he's up for the challenge. It'll be very, very interesting to see what the team is going to want to do with him. Obviously, I think he could be all-pro in both wide receiver and corner. So it'll be very, very interesting to see what will happen with Hunter. Once again, he's one of the most interesting talents that we've seen in the draft in quite some time, and not only interesting, but one of the best that we've seen. So it's up to really the Giants or the Browns to decide what they're going to do with him, but it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And now we move on to our second segment. This is Ethan Pitzman, and we'll be talking about some quarterbacks. So, Ethan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Mitch. Thanks for having me.
So, interesting quarterback class. You mentioned it's not very strong compared to previous years. What do you see in this draft?
Yeah, I just wanted to come on today and talk about who I think will be the three likely QBs to go in the first round, whether or not they're going to actually go in the first round, and kind of where they might end up. So maybe we could start. I have three QBs that I think will be the top three to go, and we could see, kind of compare what you think and if you agree. So to start off, I think Cam Ward will go as the first QB in the draft. I think it'll be followed by Shedeur Sanders and then Jackson Dart of Ole Miss. How does that compare to your list, you think?
I think that's basically set in stone. I mentioned it in my first my intro, but Cam Ward is basically locked into one. Even if he somehow slides, he'll be going top three at least. And Shedeur Sanders is very interesting. Some people had him marked into 2 or 3 for most of the season, but he has slid. And then Jackson Dart as well has a lot of talent, but he has slid as well. Now, I know you mentioned they might not all go in the first round, but more likely than not, I think those will be the first 3 quarterbacks off the board, even if it leaks into the early second round.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think Cam Ward this year is kind of a lock with the Titans. Is that kind of what you're seeing?
Yeah, it's basically, like I just said, they're basically have been locked in. Some people have some questions on if they should go Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter. And even if Cam Ward is the right choice, I'm not entirely sure they should be going quarterback. But it looks like it's going to be Cam Ward. I would bet my entire house on it, basically.
Yeah, I was looking at some of the ESPN analysts, and they were saying that it would be the surprise of the draft if the Titans don't end up going with Cam Ward. I mean, he had 4,300 yards, 39 TDs. It seems like that's the right direction they should go. There was a little bit of a disagreement when I was looking at like CBS Sports versus ESPN on where Shedeur Sanders might end up. Do you think he's more likely to fall back with the Steelers, or could someone like the Saints pick him up a little earlier in the draft?
Well, the Saints are at 9, and even a couple weeks ago I didn't think it would be possible, but there was news that Derek Carr might be out for the entirety of next season. New head coach Kellen Moore is coming in, and he might look to get his quarterback of the future, even if Shedeur at 9 is a little bit of a reach. But if he makes it past 9, I think 21 is a very good spot for him to go. The Steelers have essentially no one at quarterback right now, and even if he makes it past the Steelers, then we start getting into some conversations. How far could he really fall? But yeah, between the Saints and the Steelers, I really like the Steelers. I don't think the Saints will take him. I think they'll kind of ride out with Derek Carr, and if not, I think they'll give Spencer Rattler the keys, whether that's a good thing or not. Maybe it'll get him a high draft pick. I can't see Shedeur at 9.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, his draft stock has been very volatile, so we don't really know. It's not like last year where we had 6 QBs, like kind of a lock in the top 12. This year there's just a couple of guys up there, so I would be surprised if he falls out of the first round. I think Steelers is the most likely spot he will end up, but only time will tell. So moving on to Jackson Dart of Ole Miss. He put up a great campaign this year as well, 4,279 yards, 29 TDs. I was looking on ESPN analysts were saying his player comparison with someone like Bo Nix. Do you agree with that? And where do you think he's most likely to end up? Because right now, I'm saying if Shedeur ends up going earlier, he could be a potential pick for the Steelers, or he might end up falling into the second round.
He's a really interesting prospect because he has a lot of talent. He has all the stats to show it in that, especially in that Lane Kiffin offense at Ole Miss. But I don't have the exact stat, but I'm pretty sure it was something north of 60% of all of his dropbacks were either RPOs or play actions. So he doesn't have a ton of experience going straight drop back, reading a defense, and making a throw. So I like that Bo Nix comparison a lot. I think it makes a lot of sense. Bo Nix at Oregon 2 years ago did a lot of the same thing. So I like that comparison. Now, as for where he could go, you mentioned the Steelers. That would make a lot of sense as well. But there's another team, the Rams, have the 26th pick. I know they have Matthew Stafford, who last year still played at a pretty high level, but he's nearing the end of his career. He might have 1 or 2 more years in him, it looks like, and maybe they start to take a chance. Maybe he can sit behind Stafford for a year, learn the McVay offense, and maybe that could be a possibility. Also, the Giants going from 34, maybe moving back into the late second round or early first round. Oh my goodness, late first round, and maybe making a trade with maybe the Bills, who have been known to trade back in previous drafts. Maybe they slide in late and take Jackson Dart at 30.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you said about the Rams could be a great pick. As you're saying, Matthew Stafford, he's 37 years old at this point. The Rams have to start to plan for 2026 and beyond. I think Dart's ability to hit receivers like on a rope basically, and just his throwing ability, it's fun to watch. It almost reminds me of Matthew Stafford a little bit, and as we said, kind of like Bo Nix. So I do think he'd be a good fit for the Rams if they choose to go that way. Also, a couple other interesting points. I was looking at the ESPN analyst, and Mel Kiper Jr. said that a good player comparison for Shedeur Sanders would be Jared Goff. And that wasn't the first guy that came to mind. I wanted to see what your thoughts are on that.
I don't hate that comparison at all because Shedeur, a lot of people thought he might be a little bit more agile than he was, but he really is just a pure drop back, read the defense, make a throw. He has unbelievable arm talent. Now, he might not be able to throw it as far as some other quarterbacks, but he is very smart with the football. He knows how to put it in a tight window, read a defense. There are some problems on if he can escape sacks and how long he sits in the pocket, which is kind of a similar thing to Jared Goff, but I see the similarities when it comes to reading a defense, making an easy throw, making the right throw, and I think that's a great comparison.
Yeah, I agree. I think these three are kind of the standout quarterbacks, in my opinion, for this year's draft, and I'm excited to see where they end up. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Ethan. It was an honor, and I hope you had a good time. Now we're back with our third segment. Dom, thank you for coming on today. Dom will be talking about the NFL draft and players announcing picks, fans announcing picks, and some other traditions when it comes to the draft. So, Dom, introduce yourself and how's it going?
Yeah, I'm Dominick Corsi. Draft time's here. We're excited. It's crazy to think, sometimes, the NFL draft used to be just a bunch of guys sitting in a conference room, calling in picks, all that. Now it's kind of transformed into a giant event. It's not even at the peak of what it could be. Last year it actually I think attendance peaked. It was at 700,000. It's never been that high. Last year was in where? It was in Detroit last year.
Yeah, it was in Detroit. I have it right here. It was estimated 775,000 fans, which broke the previous record of 600,000 that was in Nashville in 2019. So that's a insane number to look at.
It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And like for for like 60 years it was in New York City in Radio Music Hall, and then I think there was a scheduling conflict in 2014 that made a move. They went to Chicago, and then from there on it's been almost a different city every year, besides the virtual draft in 2020. But I think the continued tradition of allowing fans, former players, and things like that, allowing them to go up on stage and announce picks, I think it's special. I think it's important. At times I think it's a little gimmicky, but I do think it's interesting. The draft has become such a spectacle, with the league implementing fan involvement with a bunch of storied fans and legends of the game trying to hype up their own teams. I'm not sure when that started. That probably was around the same time that they went away from Radio Music Hall, but yeah.
And I know it's really cool to watch. You mentioned players, not only players, but fans announcing picks too. I know I'm a Bills fan, so I looked into this. They have a 16-year-old guy who is part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation. His name is Tommy, I might mess this up, Paramezio, who is, like I said, part of the Make-A-Wish Foundation. He has Duchenne muscular dystrophy. So he's a 16-year-old, and the Bills are flying him out to Green Bay, and he'll be announcing their first-round draft selection. Now,
super cool.
Let's hope that we don't trade back. The Bills are known for trading back out of the first round. But
picking 30, what is it, 31, 30?
30 this year.
Yeah.
But, it's a very, very cool thing to do, and I know there's been other players like that in the past. I know I'm blanking on his name, but a couple years ago when Kayvon Thibodeau got drafted, there was a member of the Make-A-Wish Foundation who announced his pick, and that was maybe the most iconic moment of the draft that year. And stuff like that's so special, and it just makes you feel good.
Yeah, I was gonna mention, a lot of the iconic draft picks were made by Make-A-Wish kids. One of my favorites is Pancho Villa, when he made the draft pick for Harrison Phillips, 2018. That was pretty special. 2019, Brandon Beane made sure he was involved. He called Pancho Villa to announce the pick to the league office. That was Ed Oliver. Other iconic moments, everyone that goes up there, it's a division rival of the Cowboys, or, just nobody likes the Cowboys, so everyone's going to take that opportunity to troll them. Justin Tuck did it before. David Akers was iconic when he said, "Hey, Dallas, the last time you were in the Super Bowl, these draft picks weren't even born." That was pretty iconic. But yeah, I like the trend of hyping up certain teams. I think Kyle Brandt, he's done it for multiple teams. Regardless of what you think of him as a media member, I think he's pretty cool. Nate Burleson does the same thing. A lot of former players do that for, the teams that they were drafted by, the teams that they had storied careers with, Usually the host city gets some special treatment. I know this year there's actually 13 former Wisconsin Badgers that are making announcements because it's in Green Bay. And
that's very cool.
Yeah, and then the Packers, they have, I think, 3 or 4, players making announcements. But, I do have gripes with the whole process of it. I don't really love the idea of active players making announcements. I don't know why. It just kind of rubs me the wrong way. It kind of takes away from, fans and legends that should be doing it. And I also, I know we've talked about David Akers, making a big deal about Dallas, and, Nate Burleson taking 2 minutes to make a draft pick, but I really don't like some of the guys that take too long to get to the point and they kind of make the pick about themselves. I think for the draft picks, it's kind of the most important day of their lives, most important moments of their lives, and it's, we got to get it, super drawn out monologue, by a former player or random media member. It's like, that's how they're going to remember their draft,
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that a lot of people don't look at, because obviously it's cool. Like, I know what comes to mind when you talk about the talking trash to some of the fans is when Pat McAfee announced the pick in Nashville, and
Titans.
He's a punter for the Indianapolis Colts, so he said, "You guys might not know me because we didn't punt much against the Titans." Yeah. That's cool and all, but then, like you said, for most of these guys, it is the best day of their life to date. Yeah. And, when there's going to be people that, I don't know who McAfee announced. and I feel bad that I don't. It should be about the players. It shouldn't be about the people making the picks, and I see why that can rub you the wrong way. I know I didn't really think about it until you just brought it up right now.
Yeah, that's just something that's, it kind of feels the same as like, too many commercial breaks. It's too commercialized, I think. But the draft itself is cool, and it's continuing to grow. I think as fan involvement grows, attendance will continue to grow, and I think they're doing a good job with it, and I'm really excited for tomorrow night.
Yeah, I mean, it's my favorite day of the year, probably. I have a controversial take. I think the draft is better than Super Bowl Sunday, unless your team is in the Super Bowl, but it is my favorite 2-3 day stretch of the year. It's so much fun, and yeah, Dominick, thank you for coming on. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully, I know if Green Bay and Cleveland can get it, hopefully Buffalo could get a draft in the near future. So
that's what the stadium's for.
Thank you for coming on, Dominick.
No problem. Thank you.
Moving on to our third segment, now we're going to get into some New York action. So the Giants and the Jets, both two of the most infamous teams when it comes to making draft day disasters, if you will. So we have two guys on, Anthony and Colin, who did a little bit of research on both those teams and are going to talk a little bit today about what they can do to not screw up their pick this year. So Colin and Anthony, take it away.
Yo. I'm Anthony, and first of all, I'm from New York. I'm from Brooklyn. So I'm not really a football fan too much, but I know enough about football, and it's as for the Giants, I don't even want us to win a Super Bowl. I just want us to just have a winning season. The last time we did any good was 2 years ago against Minnesota, I think, and then we just got clobbered by Philly the next game. And I was 12 when they had that one run against Green Bay that was 2016, 2017.
That was when the
Odell was still on the
taken.
team,
Yep.
and Sterling Shepard, all of them, and then that was the last time I remember us ever making the playoffs. But I'm a basketball fan, so I really don't be tuning in. But I don't know, I just want to win for the city, for the culture. And I know this draft we got 8 draft picks, so we got a lot to work with. We got the number 3 pick too, so. I don't know. We were 3-14 last year. Daniel Jones was a bum. Saquon's gone. We got no O-line. I don't know. It's horrible, but we got Russell Wilson, which I don't understand why. I mean, he's still quality, but it's his 14th year or something like that. And you got Jameis Winston, so you got 2 QBs that are both veterans. So that's not they're not franchise players. So I feel if we got the 3rd draft. If we get Shador, that would be good. I know Cam Ward, Shador, and Travis probably going to go first 3. And I watched the film with Cam and Shador when they did the training with each other. Cam got a better arm. He could throw the ball, but Shador way more precise like Eli. He could, not Peyton, my fault. Eli had the better arm, but Peyton was more precise, and he could really throw in the pocket. I think Shador got that. But that don't make sense if you don't got no O-line to help him. Cam can get out the pocket. Cam can run. We saw Cam in Miami, running and moving, but Shador can't really move too well, but I'm not worried about that. If we get Shador, we should be okay. But is he going to play? Because we got Russell and we got Jameis, so it's would he even play? And I don't know if Dion would want his son to sit down for the first year and not do nothing. But I don't know if we're going to have Cam. Cam might go first, so I don't really know. But if we get Cam, that would be cool. And then we definitely need defensive line. I know Abdul Carter, too. Abdul Carter is an elite edge rusher. So if we get him, that would be good, because everything about the Giants suck. Offense, defense, head office, coaching. Brian DeBall is not too bad, but we need something.
So when it's you mentioned you want Shador, but you already mentioned too, we have 2. I'm not a Giants fan, or I'm not on the team either, but they just signed 2 veteran quarterbacks. Would you want to see them take a guy like Abdul Carter, who a lot of people, including myself, think he's the best player in the draft overall, regardless of positional value? I think he's
better than Travis?
I think it's 1A, 1B, personally.
Okay.
So would you be upset if they didn't go quarterback and took one of those 2 players and then maybe next year tried to, quote-unquote, tank and get someone like Arch Manning in the draft next year and kind of just have a filler year?
I wouldn't be upset, but it's just we don't know what the pool's going to be next year. We don't know what the quarterback pool's going to look like. I mean, this draft is kind of a blessing. We got 2 outstanding quarterbacks going back to back, so we have a chance to get somebody. And Russell, we don't know if he's going to stay healthy, if he's going to even stay. Jameis might have one great game, and the next game is 6 interceptions. So it's we might need a franchise quarterback, but then you don't want to put that player in that position where they're there for their career and they're not winning and they're just because NFL doesn't have the flexibility that NBA does. In the NBA, you could kind of move around more, request trades, kind of like force your way out of a team. In the NFL, you're not really leaving if they don't let you leave. So I don't know if we want to put a player in that position. So you might be right. I mean, Abdul might come, be a great asset, take a filler year, but I don't know if the city wants that. I mean, the Knicks is in the playoffs right now. Probably the only winning team we got. The Nets is the Nets. So I think we just want wins. We need wins. I don't know. So I don't think it can go wrong, whoever they pick, whether Shador or Abdul. I don't think it's a wrong answer, but it's just how they're going to go because the NFC is getting better every year. So Philly's stamped right now. San Francisco is always there. Minnesota has their days where they're the best team in the league, then they might be a bum the next day. So I don't know. We gotta see what's going on with that.
Yeah, I mean, especially you kind of talked about it, the teams in the NFC, even the NFC East. You just look at the quarterbacks. You got obviously Dak Prescott, you got Jalen Hurts, but then the rise of Jaden Daniels. I mean, those are three quarterbacks that at any given moment can go out and win a game for you. And the Giants have yet to find a guy that can really match that. So it'll be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah.
Now, moving on to the Jets, who can't really say they've done much better when it comes to football, draft, or really anything. So, yeah, Colin, what do you have in mind for the Jets? What do you think the Jets should do at 7?
Well, the Jets are, I wouldn't say they're a good team. They haven't been for a little while. And especially after last season, Aaron Rodgers just left. And now they have some new leadership. Their head coach, Aaron Glenn, and their GM, Darren Mogi. And I think that's how you say his name, Darren Mogi. And then so now their focus is more shifted towards their new quarterback, Justin Fields, and supporting him with whatever he needs. And we know that the Jets have a history of missing out on key first-round picks and just messing around. So what
they ain't been good since Darrell Revis.
They need to strengthen their O-line. And they need to get a smart selection to be able to protect Justin Fields. And a lot of draft experts believe that the Jets will focus on selecting an O-line to fortify their line. There are people such as, Missouri's Armand Membu.
Yeah, he's a beast.
Yeah, athleticism out the world, I'm not going to lie. And they also have, LSU's Will Campbell is another top contender. And some mock drafts suggest that Jets might go for Tyler Warren from Penn State so that he could get a steady target, or Justin Fields at least. And since they believe that protecting Fields is probably the most urgent need, the O-line is best. And Membu would be able to help the whole left by Morgan Moses after he left. And I'd say if Membu is off the board, they just need a benefit in general. They need to get an O-line or just trade to get some extra picks. Because a tight end like Warren would be able to help with passing and stuff, but getting protection for Fields and making sure that, how do I say it? I'll just say it like that. Getting protection for Fields would and should be their top and best priority. And I would say this draft gives them a chance to make a meaningful pick, but we'll see if they actually fall through with it for once.
I mean, they got pieces, though. They got Sauce Gardner on defense. Got Garrett Wilson. They just got pieces. I mean, Justin Fields isn't that bad. He could run.
5-what?
Better than the Giants. So it's like...
Not great. I will have a question for you. So you mentioned Tyler Warren, who might be one of the most versatile weapons in the draft this year. So do you think it's in the possibility for them if Ted McMillan, who a lot of people think is maybe the second best receiver in the draft, do you think it makes sense to maybe go for a receiver to pair with Garrett Wilson and help out Justin Fields a little bit more?
I think so, yeah. Because if he's able to get more help, it'll just make things a whole lot easier. Spread out space on the field and all of that.
And Fields could run, too. So you've seen him get out the pocket and move. And we know what Wilson could do. He's athletic. He could jump. His route running could use a little bit more work, but he can definitely go get that ball. So defense is probably going to double him at this point if they don't get another weapon. Like how they used to double Julio Jones, or they would double Odell, they'll double Antonio Brown. They'll probably just double him when he starts having good games. So if they get another weapon, takes the pressure off him. Or a tight end, though, that would also help because you just need someone that when you have 5 yards to go, third down, just go get that ball, So they got room to, room to improve. But Jets could do something though. They could do something.
And then one last thing before we wrap it up, a new head coach. You mentioned Aaron Glenn, who was the defensive coordinator at Detroit, or in Detroit, I should say. And he got to see those offensive lines, how they can dominate and take over a game and really turn around an entire season with how dominant an O-line can be, regardless of who's back there at quarterback. So I wouldn't be surprised if he saw what happened in Detroit and takes a chance on Armin Memba or Calvin Banks or Will Campbell, one of those three guys who can play tackle on both sides, or maybe even slide into guard if they can't fit into the athleticism of being a tackle in the NFL. So, Anthony and Colin, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you guys enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And enjoy the draft tomorrow.
All right, man.
So now moving on to our next guest, Hailey, who will be talking about some of the history of Green Bay and Green Bay fans. So, Hailey, I've been watching the NFL for quite some time, and one of the most famous things about the NFL is Green Bay and the Cheeseheads. And I got to be honest, I have no idea what it comes from. So can you help me out and maybe answer that question for me?
So actually, the Green Bay Packers, the fans were being insulted by Bears fans. And this one guy decided, while he was reupholstering his mom's couch, he decided to cut part of the couch and paint it like a cheesehead, and wanted to be a proud cheesehead and wore it to the game. And then that just became the thing. And his name was Ralph Bruno. This was back in the 80s.
I mean, that's really interesting. I didn't know anything about that. I know there's some fans that have tried to mimic their own version of the Cheeseheads. I know I'm a Bills fan. I live in Buffalo. There's a lot of people that wear a chicken wing hat to the games, which is kind of weird. But I mean, the Cheesehead has to be maybe the most iconic headgear in all of football besides the actual helmet. Yeah, so that's really interesting. And Hailey, that's a question like I said, I've been watching the NFL I'm 20 now, so basically my entire life, and I have never had the answer to that question. So thank you so much for coming on and helping out some people that might be seeing a lot of Cheeseheads in the draft this upcoming weekend.
Of course.
Thank you. All right, so for our next segment, we'll welcome on Logan, who will be talking about the commissioner getting booed, which happens in every sport at every draft, and a lot of people don't really know why they boo. They just boo. So, Logan, take it away.
Yeah, so, I mean, Roger Goodell, he's been the commissioner of the NFL since 2006. And as you said, it happens in every league with every commissioner. Every time he comes out on the stage, especially for the first time, everyone is just, they lay it on him. And it increased a lot more in around 2015 when they started traveling for the draft. And no one knows exactly why, but, I mean, it's the commissioner of the biggest league in America, and teams fans can kind of express their frustrations by just booing the leader of this league. And, I mean, the guy makes $64 million a year, and he makes some pretty bad decisions, so some fans have a right to be upset with him.
I know, for example, there's certain fans, maybe people in New England, who didn't necessarily agree with Deflategate. They for sure have a certain reason to be booing, but even in Detroit, who, no disrespect to Detroit, really hasn't been that much of a national team or really a powerhouse in the NFL. So that raises the question, what has Roger Goodell done to Detroit to really get booed, or even in Cleveland? And I got to say, it is one of my favorite traditions in the draft. He gets up there always with a smile on his face. Sometimes he even plays into it, and he'll ask the fans, what did I do? But it's so much fun to watch, especially when they play into it a little bit. I know Adam Silver in the NBA does a good job of it too, and it's interesting. I kind of like that there really isn't a reason that we do it.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, some fan bases don't necessarily have a reason, and at this point, it's more just a tradition. And I mean, with Deflategate, that's something that Patriots fans probably don't like how he handled it. The rest of the league probably don't like how they handled it. And then, I mean, he has so many other, the suspension of Ray Rice for 2 games, and then he was like, never mind, I'm going to suspend him indefinitely, or Terrell Pryor before he even got to the NFL. But there's so much stuff that he's done that, I mean, he has reasons to be booed, but it's more of a traditional thing at this point.
Especially, too, I know some Bills fans, instead of a trickle-down effect, maybe a triple-up effect, because, there's Josh Allen might have gotten that first down, and Is Roger Goodell out there on the field making that call? No, but he is in charge of the people who are making that call. So, therefore, Roger Goodell is getting booed for the fact that Josh Allen didn't get called, getting a first down. And it's just little stuff like that where fans boo. And, again, you mentioned it. They don't even know why they're doing it. It's more just do it just to do it. And I think that's what makes the draft such a spectacle. I mean, there's no other league where the draft is really this big of a deal.
Yeah, and like you said, he's kind of played into it a little bit, and I do like that too. Like, the NFL's smart; they know how to make their money, and I mean, if he plays into it, almost makes it not as fun, the fact that he's playing into it. But I mean, it is cool to see that he acknowledges the fans doing it. But I think the NFL. I mean, they shouldn't do anything about it. Just let it keep happening. If they want to play into it, they can play into it. But I think it is something cool and unique about every league has a form of it, but I think the NFL has the most unique form of it.
Especially, too, I mean, I could be mistaken, but the 2020 draft that was all virtual due to COVID, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure ESPN played some booing sounds during the draft, even though he was announcing the picks from his basement. I think that's just really funny. Even ESPN, the commissioner, probably had something to do with it, and I sound like a broken record, but it's just such a nice tradition that's so simple, but it just adds to the spectacle that is the NFL draft.
Yeah, I was reading that I think it was Busch Light. They did a thing where they could like go on a Zoom call and virtually boo the commissioner, which that's pretty cool. I mean, during COVID, people didn't have much to do, so it brought a little bit of fun into a pretty bad situation, which was that draft.
Yeah, so, I mean, Logan, thank you so much for coming on. It's such a tradition that I guarantee we'll see tomorrow, Friday, and even into Saturday when it's the late rounds. But, Logan, again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
All right, so welcome on Matt Volz into our second last segment, who will be talking about some of the biggest draft screw-ups of really NFL history. So, Matt, take it away.
Yeah, we got some fun ones. I had to double check some of the years on this, but my first favorite story comes from the early 80s. This is a while ago, so the draft's very different back then. This was back in 1982. They used to have the draft at the Sheridan in New York City, and Pete Rozelle would come up and say the name, and they'd have the helmet-shaped. You ever see those, the helmet-shaped phones?
Yep.
Those are the coolest thing ever, and I don't know why they got rid of those.
That's when every team used to sit in the hall, right?
Yeah, everyone would have like a table. Kind of the NHL does the same thing now too.
Mm-hmm.
But they would have that. Everyone would be sitting there, and they'd have the representatives would call on the phone, and they would literally call in their pick, which is still the case, but like it was very different back then. So in 1982, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had the 17th pick, and early 80s. Late 70s, the Bucs were a disaster, right?
Yep.
I mean, this is a team that lost their first 26 games in their existence. They weren't much better in the early 80s. So in 82, the Bucs had the 17th pick, and they were between two guys. They weren't sure who they wanted. There was an offensive lineman from Penn State. His name was Sean Farrell, and a defensive end from Bethune-Cookman, Booker Reese. And they weren't sure which one they wanted to go with. They eventually decided on Booker Reese. So the phone call to the draft lottery the draft lobby when they were calling in their pick, the way the guy phrased it, why he would phrase it like this in the first place, I don't know. But the way he phrased it, he said, "We're not going with Sean Farrell, we're going with Booker Reese." It was, now, background noise, guys trying to hear into the phone, it's crazy loud, so the only name he hears is Sean Farrell. He doesn't hear him say, "We're going with Booker Reese." So he just assumes, yep, it was Farrell. So they go to the front, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the representatives are sitting at the table waiting to have Booker Reese drafted, and they're so excited. And you can imagine their horror when Pete Rozelle announces that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have selected Sean Farrell, offensive lineman out of Penn State. They go into a panic. The best part of this story is that, so this is in 82, Tampa Bay ends up trading their first-round pick the next year. They trade their 83 first-round pick to move up to an early second-round pick. They didn't have a second-round pick. So they moved their first-round pick the next year for a second-rounder in that draft just to draft Booker Reese when he fell down the draft board. And then Booker Reese ended up being a total bust.
That's awesome.
And the 83 draft, if you remember, was the draft with John Elway, Dan Marino, Jim Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
So
That's awesome.
an all-timer, one of my favorites, and I have two others here. I won't go on too long either. The other one was in 2003 when the Minnesota Vikings missed their pick,
Yep.
which I'm sure you probably heard of. So the Vikings were picking 7th overall. But the story with this is that they wanted to trade down a few spots. And the rumor was that they had a deal supposedly in place with the Ravens, who were picking 10th. And they were going to move down. They were going to pick up, like, I don't know, an extra mid-round pick or something. And they were going to take Kevin Williams, the defensive tackle out of Oklahoma State. The trade was thought to be in place. And then somehow it never got finalized. And the clock ran out. And the procedure with that is the next team can jump up and make their pick. Jacksonville was on the clock next. Jacksonville jumps up, and that's actually when the Jags drafted Byron Leftwich, was when they jumped ahead of the Vikings. And then the Carolina Panthers also jumped ahead of the Vikings, and they took Jordan Gross, who was a really good offensive lineman for that for a few years. So this isn't really that major of a thing. They only dropped 2 spots, and they still ended up getting the guy they wanted. They still got Kevin Williams, who was a very good defensive tackle for them for a few years. But it's part of an insane Vikings era that, in my mind, included, I think Mike Tice is maybe the worst coach in the history of the NFL.
I mean, that was shortly after the same time period where this is not Detroit, man, this is the Super Bowl?
No, that was before. That was when Favre was there. This was this was 03. Yeah, this was 03. This was like Randy Moss, Dante Culpepper era.
Yep.
When they had Culpepper to Moss, and they were still not good.
Awful, yeah.
Because Mike Tice was a terrible head coach.
Mm-hmm.
This was, the Vikings boat incident, all that sort of stuff was around this time.
The boat incident.
The boat incident, not the same one as the Giants boat incident.
I will say, if you haven't listened to the Part of My Take episode where they have, I forget who they have on, but they have someone on who was in the boat incident, and it's an awesome listen. I recommend listening to it.
Yeah, there's a few, like I know Bryant McKinney, who was their left tackle, he was on that boat too. It was a crazy story. So the last one that I have is in 2011 when the Cleveland Browns called the wrong player. Have you heard of this?
I think I have.
Yes. So rewind just a little bit. In the first round, the Saints selected Cam Jordan, who of course has gone on to be an amazing defensive end for them. They picked him with the 24th pick. So fast forward to the 4th round, the Cleveland Browns are on the clock, and they are selecting Jordan Cameron, who is a tight end. And they called Cam Jordan. And Cam Jordan answers the phone, and the Cleveland Browns are like, hello there. We're so proud to tell you that we're going to be taking you with our 4th round pick. And Cam's like, I think you have the wrong player because the Browns drafted me the Saints drafted me in the 1st round. So I don't think you got the right player. And all I can think is that thank God it was that way, that they called a player who had been drafted.
That would have been
instead of the other way around. Can you imagine if the Saints, if you call someone who's supposed to go like middle of the draft to say that you're taking him in the 1st round, and then you're like, oh, you're not actually coming to us.
Yeah,
we called the wrong guy.
That'd be
it's
awful.
Crazy.
I know. I have one quick one.
Yeah.
That I don't know if you've heard because it's new. It's a newer one. So a couple of years ago, I believe it's the 2023 draft. There were 2 guys named Byron Young in the draft.
Yes.
Okay? There was a linebacker out of Tennessee and a defensive tackle out of Alabama. Now, the Rams took Byron Young. The Raiders took the defensive tackle, Byron Young, and the Rams took the linebacker, Byron Young. Fast forward 2 years later, the Rams' Byron Young racked up 62 tackles and 7.5 sacks during his first season. He had a very good year. The other Byron Young on the Raiders was waived before his 2nd year in the NFL. There's some speculation that the Raiders took the wrong Byron Young. Now, obviously, hindsight's 2020. Like, they picked the worst out of the 2 Byron Youngs, and they had similar draft stock, so it's not that crazy. But it is very funny to think that, especially the Raiders, with how the franchise has been in the past couple years.
Exactly.
There's always that chance where they just straight up drafted the wrong Byron Young and had to roll with it. And it's just so funny.
Yeah, remember, you're talking about a team that drafted a kicker in the 1st round, too.
Who went on to be a really, really good
one of the best
kicker.
kickers in NFL history.
Let's
so
not
I'll give Al
disrespect him
Davis
that much.
credit, but I mean, you're talking about a team that took Darius Hayward-Bay in the top 10.
Took Damon Arnett in the first round.
Took Damon Arnett in the first
That
round.
was a
Took
bad
Alex
pick.
Leatherwood in the first round when he had like a late second,
Not even mentioning
early third grade.
Clinton Farrell at
Oh,
4.
Cleveland Farrell, 4th overall.
That
when,
was awful.
When the other Josh Allen and Ed Oliver
Mhm.
and those guys were still on the board.
Yep.
That was funny.
Well, Matt, that'll wrap up our segment, but don't go anywhere because Matt will be back here for our next segment
Yes.
when we cap it off with some Bills draft prospects. And welcome back. Hopefully you didn't go anywhere. So, Bills have 3 picks in the top 65. They pick at 30, 56, and 62. Now, I've done a little bit more research than I have in recent years regarding the draft, but I'll start with you, Matt. Matt, Bills are on the clock at pick 30. We don't trade back. We don't do anything. We're staying at 30. Who do you want to see the Bills take?
So it's interesting. I think a lot of it is going to depend on sort of positional runs, right? I mean, I would say that the biggest position I've complained about it for the last several years that the Bills, in my mind, the defensive line disappears in way too many big games. And I think going and getting an interior defensive lineman, and we're talking about not trading up, right? We're talking about staying put at 30.
We're sitting at 30.
Yeah, so I think that I would not be surprised if a lot of the better defensive linemen, like you're talking about, like Kenneth Grant or somebody like that, those guys, I think, at 30 will be gone. So then I think you take a look at some other areas. I would think you're going defense at 30. I would think so. One player that I definitely have looked at is the safety from South Carolina, Nick Emenwari. I think that he is a good player. I think he's a very coachable player, and he's someone who might be available at 30. I almost think he will be, unless you get a team that really needs a safety that jumps ahead. So I think that's something. I think that's something worth looking at. As far as corner is concerned, it's questionable because the Bills brought back Tre'Davious White. You don't know how effective he's going to be. He was decent with the Ravens last year, but he's not what he was.
No.
So I think that I don't know if that changes the discussion at all. I'm looking at defensive linemen. The number one player, ideally, in my mind, that I would love to have is Kenneth Grant. I don't know that he'll be there at 30. I don't think he will. So if you're talking about staying put at 30, not going anywhere, I'm looking at Nick Emenwari as a safety, but there's some other options there.
And, I mean, I'm on the board with you almost, or on the same boat with you almost completely. I mean, Kenneth Grant, I don't think will be there at 30, but he is really, by definition, what the Bills have been missing since Sean McDermott has really taken over and this Josh Allen era has started. Kenneth Grant is by definition, a one technique, so that means he'll line up in between the guard and the center, and he'll go right next to Ed Oliver, who plays 3 techs, so that's out in between the guard and the tackle. Now, even when we drafted Ed Oliver, we knew he wasn't going to be a guy that was able to blow up double teams. He wasn't going to overpower guards, but what he could do is when you got him in space, he could, use his quickness and his agility to get by guards. When he's getting double teamed because a one technique isn't really a threat, that's where Ed Oliver falls, and that's why he hasn't really put up the stats that we expected him to put up out of Houston. If you get Kenneth Grant, the guy just eats up double teams. I watched a couple games from him. He just, even if he's not necessarily making a play, you're not going to move him. Even on a run play or a pass play, you're not moving him. You have to put 2 bodies on him, or else he's just going to bull rush the center or the guard up the field. And that leaves a ton of space for Ed Oliver, even Greg Russo on the outside or AJ Epinesa on the outside. And I think that would be a great pick. And then you mentioned Nick Emenwari. I've been on the Nick Emenwari train, I think you can attest to this, for quite some time.
Yeah.
Even back in the fall, I was a big Nick Emenwari fan. He is an athletic specimen at safety. He has started for 3 years on South Carolina, and like you said, he's very coachable, and McDermott has shown he can really take whatever at safety and make it work. And when you have a guy like Emenwari who can play in the box, he can play deep safety, free safety, like that Micah Hyde role, it just gives you, for lack of a better word, like a toy to use back there to really, you can blitz him, you can put him up on the line, he can cover sideline to sideline, and when you have bigger guys, like obviously Travis Kelce might have taken a step down, but tight ends aren't going anywhere in the NFL offense, and when you have a guy who can match up on tight ends or even bigger receivers like Emanwari, I mean, it's going to be hard to pass him up.
Yeah, absolutely. I just as we were thinking about that, I was looking at a Yahoo Sports mock draft. They have Kenneth Grant falling completely out of the first round.
And I can see that happening because the thing with Grant is he's not going to put up stats. He's not going to be a guy. I mean, really, a lot of D tackles aren't going to put up stats unless
Yeah.
your name is Dexter Lawrence or Aaron Donald.
Yeah.
But he's a guy that's not going to make flashy plays. He's not going to, be on the highlight reel when the season ends. But what he's going to do is disrupt double teams. If you're going to try to run the ball at him, good luck.
Yeah.
Because he's not going to get moved by one person, let alone two people. And he's just a guy that, is an unsung hero, if you will. He's going to be there. He's going to clog up plays. And that's a lot of the reason, not taking anything away from Mason Graham. He's a tremendous prospect. But that's a lot of the reason why Mason Graham was able to succeed so much is because Kenneth Grant was just eating up blocks.
Yeah. Yeah, another interesting I'm looking at this mock draft, by the way, has the Saints taking Jackson Dart with the 9th pick.
Can't see that happening.
I would genuinely be in shock. They have Milrow going to the Steelers at 21, which I could see
Where do
before.
they have Shadur going?
I don't think they have Shadur.
They have Milrow and
going
Dart
in
over
round
Shadur.
one. I don't think they have
That's
Shadur going.
interesting.
And
That is
I don't know who did this.
interesting.
They also have Ashton Genty going 5th overall to Jacksonville.
I've seen a couple mocks that have been switching. Even I think Peter Schrager put his out and had Ashton Genty, the Jaguars. I can't see that happening. They had Travis Etienne.
I don't think it's a fit.
No.
No.
And obviously, Genty is way better than Tank Bigsby and Travis Travis Etienne. Trevor's the
Easy
brother.
on the Tank Bigsby criticism, but all right.
But I don't know. I can't see it happening. You have so many other holes to fill. Just take Ted McMillan and ride with that.
Yeah, absolutely. They have Ted McMillan falling to 23 to the Packers.
He's been a polarizing player, and I won't get too much into that because I wanted to see. Do you have anything in mind for 56 or 62 when the Bills pick in the second round?
Late rounders are always and this isn't necessarily late rounders as much, but mid rounders can be a little bit more of a dart throw. Position wise, I think you might look to add another receiver. I think that bringing in Keon Coleman last year, Keon had his success, but I think that maybe you look to add some speed at the receiver position somewhere in the middle rounds. Something that would be very interesting, an interesting thought. The wide receiver out of Missouri, Luther Burden.
Luther Burden the third.
If Burden were to fall out of the first round, could Buffalo be a team that would maybe look at moving up to 40 to get him?
Mm-hmm. And Burden is a really interesting guy because he, obviously 2 years ago, he exploded onto the scene and had, I believe he won the Biletnikoff, did he not?
I think so, yeah. He was phenomenal.
He had a great season, but then last year, along with really the rest of Missouri as a whole, had a down year. He didn't really put up, I think he had, 600 yards around?
Yeah, he definitely had a down season.
Didn't have a great year by any means, but the skill is still there. Mm-hmm. He has great hands. He plays well, but some people question his route running ability or really his route tree. And then you mentioned receivers as well. I look at a guy like Jalen Noel, who out of Iowa State with that tandem, him and why am I blanking on his name? The other receiver out of Iowa State that I cannot remember his name right now, but Noel's the smaller one of the two. He's only 5'11", but he's 5'11". He plays a lot in the slot, but he can play the outside too. And I believe he ran in the 4.3s. He has legit game speed. A guy who can take the top off of defense, who is really something that the Bills don't really have. Obviously, Keon Coleman had a lot of deep catches. He was a great deep threat, but they don't have a guy who you can say, hey, go run a post route, and there's a decent chance he'll take the top off the defense. And a guy like Noel might be able to do that for the Bills' offense.
Yeah, you're thinking of Jaden Higgins, by the way.
I am thinking of Jaden Higgins. Yeah. You're correct.
Yes, I'm looking through. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a few others. Maybe, there's some others. I think that receiver is something to potentially look at. I think that's really the only one offensively that stands out to me. Other than that, maybe you look to add, maybe look to double dip on the defensive line. I mean, the last time the Bills did that, it didn't turn out so well. But there's other options there. Maybe in the later rounds, maybe you look in the second round at somebody like Shamar Turner out of Texas A&M or something like that. It'll be interesting to see what they do. You've got otherwise defensively, I think it's really just kind of secondary. But yeah.
And if they don't take Emanwari in the first round, there's a couple guys. There's Andrew Makuba. There's Xavier Watts. I don't think he'll drop into 56, but Malachi Starks, who I think can come in really any team in the NFL and be a starting level safety. I think he has maybe one of the highest floors out of any picks in this draft. He understands football, for lack of a better term, and I think those are some of the guys in the second round where the safety room isn't very strong. They re-signed Damar Hamlin. They have Cole Bishop, who didn't play a ton last year, but had to play some big snaps toward the end. And then you have Taylor Rapp as well. I still have hope for Cole Bishop, but I don't think Damar Hamlin or Taylor Rapp are really long-term options as safety. So getting a guy like Makuba or Watts, who, nice voice crack, who have played a lot of football and have played a lot of good football at big schools. Makuba went from Clemson to Texas. Xavier Watts was at Notre Dame. I mean, both those guys can come in and immediately make an impact and possibly be starting by week 1.
Yeah, definitely. I think you're sort of looking for that if you're the Bills, because obviously you're in a win-now mode, but for sure.
Yeah, so Matt, thank you so much for coming on, and that'll conclude our journalism podcast for today. Thank you so much for listening, and have a great day.